for two. Kickers are extra, I give them the boot. Ooh, going for two. Sit back, relax while I grab me a brew. Ooh, now I'm reclining while putting my time and I'm ready to go. My spine is aligning and much my lineups, my bank account grow. I am so rich, but knowledge is all that I'm leaving it with. Ooh, listen to this, multiple options, how far can I get? Ooh, DFS Dynasty Redraft tonight, I'm not finishing last. I'm finishing past, any and all I am looking to last. What else? This spot is popping and I am so locked in and only opening the door when it is opportunity knocking. And all of these spots keep on talking and talking, so what are we talking? What kind of alignment and running it deep, even players forgotten or came from the bottom or hitting that top end. And this spot is popping, yeah, this spot is popping and woo! This is the armchair, yeah. Put up your arms, yeah. Sound the alarm, yeah, yeah, yeah. Woo!
What is going on, and welcome to the Texas Redraft Personal League Podcast. I am your host tonight, Jeff Lambert. You can follow me on Twitter at JeffLambert77. Of course, we are here tonight to break down this 12-team, 1QB Redraft League. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the panel here. We got three of them tonight. First up, we got the co-host of the Fantasy Assessment Podcast, Mr. Raul. You can follow him on Twitter at SmallTalkFF. What's up, Raul?
Jeff, great to see you. Brian, I see you again. Doc, great to see you for the first time. Thanks for having me back on a PLP, Jeff. Really excited. Monday before the season starts. It really can't get better than this. Or so I thought until I started making lineup decisions. And all the memories came rushing back. But very excited to be on the show with you tonight.
Good stuff. Also joining us tonight, he's a regular here on the PLPs, Mr. Brian Ford. He is the host of the Dynasty Saturday Night 5 and Dynasty Fever podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at FFJunkie_. What's up, Brian?
Hey, how's it going? I always love these PLPs, even redraft ones. Ha ha ha. And also old enough to get the poke high reference. So Doc's going to tell you all about what he scored for touchdowns.
Good stuff. Also joining us tonight, first time in a while, we've had the doc on a PLP, Dr. James Ferretti. Of course, he is an injury analyst for GoingFor2.com. Also, the author of Injuries Suck, but Your Fantasy Team Doesn't Have To. You follow him on Twitter at TFSDoc. What's up, Jim?
Hey, guys. Good to be back. I think this is a great way to end a holiday weekend. Hopefully, we got some of the league members out here. They've been drinking all day, ready to get spicy, because I know this panel's ready to get spicy. And I don't know, the Texas League, I feel like it was a missed opportunity. I should have worn like a big cowboy hat or something like that. But, what are you going to do? It's like I'm a city boy after all, but hopefully you guys don't hold that against me. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, good stuff. All right, for those listening that are not part of this league, we're wondering what a personal league podcast is, or PLP as we call it. It's a 1-hour show dedicated to your league. I gave these guys all the rosters from this league. They ranked them in order of which they'd want to take them over, with 12 being the team they want to least take over, and 1 being the team they would most want to take over. From that, we created rankings, which we'll count down tonight. And then each of these guys have 4 teams each that they're the quote-unquote expert of. When we get to that team in the ranking, they will break them down, strengths, weaknesses, things they can do to improve, et cetera, et cetera. If you want to get one of these personal league podcasts for your league, we have sold out for this year. This is the last one of the season. However, we are already selling them for next year. Visit GoingFor2.com/PLP. You can go ahead and book your PLP for next season. All right, we got 12 teams to get to. Let's go ahead and jump right into it.
Number 12.
Number 12, right off the bat with some big disparity in the rankings here, ranked as high as 5 and as low as 12. And it is Bench, Burrow, and Deal. And Brian, kick it off here.
Yeah, so I had them at 11. So I was one of the folks who was a little low on them. So number one rule of fantasy football is to have fun, right? And part of having fun is play whatever settings you want to play. That said, I really hate to see kickers in defense, so I didn't even look at any kickers in defense on any of these teams because I refuse to recognize that they exist in fantasy football. So you got Burrow at quarterback. That's obviously good. I don't know why you would want to bench him. You're pretty good in your running back spots with Pacheco, Cook, and Singletary. Not like the favorite way that I would put my running backs together, but it's not bad. Singletary probably the shakiest on that Giants offense. You're deep at wide receiver, but it's I don't want to say you're weak, but like there's your high end, I think isn't really great. So you got Pittman, Kirk, and Deontay Johnson, and then Dubs, Palmer, Josh Palmer, Mike Williams, and Dontavian Wicks. Wicks is one of the guys that I think I want you to hold on to and ride out any any rockiness in the beginning. There's a lot of mouths to feed there and stuff like that. But I'm gonna place my bet on him to be the one that outdoes his cost more than anybody else. Kelsey, obviously a good tight end. There's some aging going on there. I think there's going to be even more load management this year. So he probably is ranked a little higher than he should be across a lot of platforms. But it's not a bad tight end to have. Obviously, it's Travis Kelsey. So y'all have small rosters, right? You have 16 spot rosters, and you're already burning 2 of them with this kicker and defense stuff. There is absolutely no need for any of you to have a second quarterback or tight end. Some of them more excusable than others. I'll get to in a second, with maybe another team. Now, having a second kicker and defense, listen, I don't really believe in the police, but you should be arrested. So I would drop the unnecessary quarterback and tight end you have going on there, like Goff and Musgrave, and hit the waiver wire for upside guys that can either accrue trade value or, give you sneaky contingency upside upon running back injury and that sort of thing. Everybody here knows the types of guys I like when it comes to that. Guys like I think he might be on a team, Bucky Irving, but like in that crowd, Bucky Irving, Marshawn Lloyd, Trey Benson, Kamani Vidal, Ray Davis, Jalen Wright, those kinds of Tyler Algier, just those guys that are going to they benefit from inevitable running back injuries. So, and just a note on being low among the group. I think I shouldn't say we all, I'll speak for myself, but a lot of times in these PLPs, what we see is there's flat tiers. There's a good first couple or first half, and there's sort of a weak second half, and say 8 through 12 is interchangeable or 1 through 6 is interchangeable. And I think that was very true in this league, which might explain sometimes why the ranks are all over the place. But your most important position is wide receiver, and that's where you're sort of weakest at the top. So didn't really like what I saw there. Yeah.
All right. And I would be remiss if I didn't go to the guy that had them ranked at 5 to get his opinion and why he liked this team as much as he did when we had him. I had him at 12. Raul's with Brian at 11, and Doc, you had him at 5. So give us your thoughts here.
Yeah, I would be curious for you guys if maybe some of the dynasty brain mentality kind of might have slipped in here a little bit, because I did notice that a lot more of the players are on the older side, but still can be really high producers, and I think that's kind of more of the way that I skew playing, whether it's redraft or dynasty. But just looking at it, it's I think briefly, I think Joe Burrow could be a top 5 quarterback, so I like that. I like the running back room, at least the starters. I think they both have high upside potential. I like the wide receivers. Michael Pittman's been kind of maligned a little bit. I'm not exactly sure why. Deontay Johnson, same thing. I see the sunny side of the street with these guys. Travis Kelsey, I'm never going to quit. And I even like the kicker and the defense. And then when I went to the bench, I'm okay, I like the bench is probably going to stink. And then that's why everybody ranked him low. And I don't see it. I'm optimistic on Devin Singletary. I like Romeo Doubs. He could emerge, in Green Bay just like anybody else. And same thing for Dontavian Wicks. I like Mike Williams to bounce back. I think Joshua Palmer's underrated. So, yeah, I like the team. So, give me this team. And that's why I ranked them higher than, maybe some other ones. I would like to manage this team, going into the year.
Yeah, so I think the dynasty brain does kind of sneak in sometimes because we're so used to looking at our dynasty rosters. But again, like Brian mentioned, it's very flat. This team is not too much worse than the 9th or the 8th team that we've ranked. Especially in a redraft league where you just drafted. There's no team that's tanking and trying to get better this year. It's pretty flat across the board. So I can see where you like this team, Doc. All right, and sorry, I had the roster up, trying to get the roster up the whole time y'all were talking. I had some technical issues, but the roster is now up on screen, so the audience can now see what we're talking about. All right, let's go ahead and jump into team number 11.
Number 11.
Number 11, ranked as high as 6 and as low as 12. And it is Math is King. And Doc, this is your squad.
All right. Well, despite being a doctor, I am not great at math. But what I can say is that I think the owner of Math is King is pretty good at drafting teams. So, don't let the rankings here fool you. It was really close between a lot of these squads in the middle of the pack, like we said. For now, let's start with the good. So the running back room, I love it. Honestly, like King Henry is a physical freak, and those age-related concerns just might not apply to him this year. And, he should be in for another year of big yardage and TD numbers in Baltimore. David Montgomery is a fine running back too. And if Jahmyr Gibbs misses time, he's an RB1. Jerome Ford should be solid. And if Chubb doesn't make it all the way back, he could be an RB1. Tajay Spears should have a decent-sized role and is startable every week. And if anything happens to Pollard, he can be an RB1. And Samaje Perine is perfect in case of injury or bye. He could score double digits any week on that Chiefs offense. And, oh, by the way, if something happens to Pacheco, he could be an RB1. Justin Jefferson is about as QB-proof in the NFL as any wide receiver. And if he could put up points with Joshua Dobbs and Nick Mullins last year, why are we worried about him putting up numbers with former first-round pick Sam Darnold? Brandon Ayuk has finally put all the trade talk to bed and is locked and loaded for another season with one of the best offenses in the NFL in San Francisco. And I know that makes Jeff very happy as a San Francisco 49ers fan. And tight end George Kittle is on that offense and this team as well. And is a threat to be the tight end 1 overall for the week, any week that he suits up. Trevor Lawrence, he's a really good quarterback, and he should finish in the top 10. But in this league setup, he's probably going to end up in the middle of the pack. So it doesn't hurt you, but it doesn't really help you that much. And while I do like the bench stash of Gabe Davis and the sneaky stack boom potential with T-Law, I really hope he evens out the consistency a little bit, because last year he scored less than 4 PPR points 9 times. Ouch. Keenan Allen has been a my guy for basically his whole career now. And I know he's 32, and that doesn't really worry me. And I know they said he came to camp out of shape and overweight, but that doesn't really worry me. However, he's missed 13 games over the past 2 years, and he's already dealing with some unspecified foot issue, and that does worry me a little bit. Quentin Johnson, last wide receiver, could just be a late bloomer, could be on waivers in a couple of weeks. And Pat Freiermuth as a backup tight end, sure. Just hope you don't have to use him for much more than a bye week fill-in for a week or two, or an injury fill-in. And last but not least, unlike Brian, I do play in leagues still that use kickers and defenses, and I had the Chiefs as a top 5 unit, and facing Gardner Minshew and a rookie quarterback twice, as well as an offense where Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman are trying to bring back the 3 yards and a cloud of dust from yesteryear in vogue, can't hurt either. So there's a lot to like here, and with a little luck, Mathis King could easily find themselves as kings of the Texas Fantasy League when it's all said and done.
Yeah, great breakdown. And then I don't want to beat a dead horse tonight, but we can say this for pretty much every team. Having 2 quarterbacks in a 1 quarterback league, even 2 tight ends, just it doesn't do anything for me. Like I did my last draft last night, and I waited into the 13th round to get my quarterback. Ended up with Justin Herbert in the 13th round, which was mind-boggling to me. But I don't usually carry 2 quarterbacks, and especially when you have 2 quarterbacks that aren't they aren't the Lamar Jacksons or the Kyler Murrays that are going to be running around potentially getting hurt. Like, we assume that Baker Mayfield and Trevor Lawrence are going to play the whole season. So really, are you ever going to be plugging in? I guess you can play matchups, but I think you put Trevor Lawrence to start, and you just roll with Trevor Lawrence all year. Now, if something happens to him, obviously, then you have to go to the waiver wire, and things are going to happen. But I'm not a big fan of having the 2 quarterbacks, because you're essentially wasting a bench spot for a guy that's, in theory, if your starter is healthy, you're going to play that bench guy for 1 week all season, and it's just not worth holding it when you can get a high upside, like Brian mentioned, running back that could, potentially get a start because someone gets hurt, or he just outplays the starter and steals that job. I would want more bullets in the gun to land one of those guys than I want to have a second quarterback on my bench holding a spot. Raul, you were at the 12th here. You have them ranked the lowest. I'm curious how you feel about this team.
Yeah, and I think the point that Brian made at the start of the show about how in redraft especially, there's a lot more flat hierarchy in the league, and unfortunately, someone had to come last. But I'll say the red flags for me on this team are the high-end players have a lot more risk, in my opinion, than the players likely picked around them. So Justin Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk, Derrick Henry, for a multitude of reasons, all have some red flags to where they may not be as safe as I don't know. I was almost gonna say Jamar Chase, but that's its own case right now. And just looking at how I build my teams and kind of where I have my rankings, I think the team really falls off after those first three players. I probably would have gone a few other directions with the quote unquote middle class of the team. I think to leave the draft with Kittle, who is probably an elite tight end by tier, but probably at like 7 out of like the top tight ends, and then not to have in my opinion, a top 12 QB with Trevor Lawrence. I just wasn't a fan of how the rest of the team was constructed. So someone had to take the bottom rung, but I probably would make the same call again, even looking at these teams back.
Fair enough. All right, let's get to team number 10.
Number 10.
Number 10 team ranked as high as 4 and as low as 10. It is Hanging with Hernandez. And Raul, this is your team.
Yeah, so I'll just like to start by, extend this conversation about how to use your bench spots. And this is one of the two teams. The second one is also one of mine, but that just bafflingly used a bench spot on a second kicker and second DST. And I really just, I just don't understand that. So, make some moves. If you're here in the chat for this podcast, we might be saying a few waiver wire names that, at least from a quick control F, I couldn't find. So that I might come up with some suggestions to act on. But yeah, just getting into the team, strengths have to be, that wide receiver room headed up by Garrett Wilson and then Nico Collins, Devonta Smith, both players, the latter two, both players, I'd say I'm ahead of consensus on. Devontae Adams taking up a bench spot. So that's one where, I probably would have looked back at the construction. Do I want to spend another high value pick on someone who's going right to the bench? Yeah, it's all done now, so you can't do anything about it. But something to note, and perhaps, if that's how you start trade negotiations, look for that. The weakness of this team for me really lies with the running back room to lead up with Stevenson and Tony Pollard. Stevenson, hard to say, but I think his range of outcomes is somewhere between like RB16 and RB24, and no more than that. I'm a little lower on Pollard. Probably, yeah, even if you meet the Tajay and Pollard in the middle, that's like an RB3 still for where I would draft them. And Chase Brown, I'm on the Zach Moss side of the war. But, it really, even at this point, 50-50. That's the last one there, unless I missed someone. Just the 3 RB. So with that already being the weakness to not have the depth is a little bit worrying. So those waiver wire names now run to the wire. Ray Davis I didn't find on a roster, and Rico Dowdle either. I sprint for Rico right at this point. So I'd really make use of those extra bench spots. And coming back to it, another strength, Anthony Richardson, though in a 6-point passing touchdown league, the edge is negated a little bit, though he should still be very productive. But yeah, like I said, as I finish off the last team, just maybe unlucky to find themselves in the bottom end of the stick, but I do see those glaring holes, especially in the running back room, that prevented me from ranking it higher.
Yeah, so I was like the highest on this team, and I'll explain why. The running backs definitely is a concern. Like you mentioned, not only are they not great, but they're also not deep. Because I'm looking at this roster, if I'm taking it over, I'm immediately dropping the extra defense. I'm going to be going to the waiver wire and adding guys like you just talked about. I just looked at their free agency. We mentioned Jalen Wright; he's a free agent. Ray Davis is on the waiver wire. Jaleel McLaughlin is on the waiver wire. All guys that I would just add to this bench, because I do think the top half of that roster, like you mentioned, Nico Collins, I'm really high on. I love Anthony Richardson this year. I probably wouldn't have spent a high pick on Sam Laporta, but he is going to be one of the top 3 tight ends this year. I love Garrett Wilson. So I'm looking at this roster like, okay, let me drop the ones that I don't really need. I don't need Noah Fant. I'm dropping those. I'm adding these running backs that potentially could gain value in the season with an injury. And then I think this roster is set up to succeed because of that. So the way the roster is currently constructed, I don't like it as much. But if I was to go drop some of those players, add those running backs that I'm talking about, I think the top end of this roster is good enough to compete for this year. So that's why I'd want to take this team over. I had him I ranked at 4. So pretty big disparity there. You had him at 10, I believe, Raul.
Yeah, no, I actually completely agree with that. Maybe a little bit of a short-terminist ranking on my part, but I actually completely agree with that plan of action there. Then it could be flipped to quickly thinking this is a 0 RB start that went right. If you can hit on those like higher upside guys who are available in the league right now.
Yeah, and just to profess my love for Jalen Wright and why I like him so much is most running backs that you draft that are backups that could get there because of injury have one guy in front of him that could get injured, whereas Jalen Wright has 2 guys potentially in front of him because Miami, even when A-Chain or Mostert was injured last year, they still split carries with somebody else. So that third running back is very valuable in Miami because he's still going to get 50% of the snaps. So he's got 2 guys in front of him that potentially get hurt that he can get an opportunity for. Doc, did you want to chime in on this team a little bit?
Yeah, I'm reading the comments here, and 2 things. So it said that this was an auto-drafted team, so that would probably explain the backup kickers and defenses. And then follow-up was that this is also a 2-keeper league, which we didn't know. That might have changed the calculus a little bit as far as how the guys might have been picked or whatever. But it looks like you mentioned Rico Dowdle, Raul, and from what I'm seeing on the screen here, it looks like he's on the team now. So great minds, that PLP money is already paying off.
Well done.
Yep, good stuff. That. All right, let's get to team number 9.
Number 9.
Number 9, another huge disparity here, is ranked as high as 3 by myself, ranked as low as 12. Brian, this is your team. It is Egg Corn.
Sorry, I was looking for the unmute button because I was typing in the thing, trying to multitask here.
Oh.
All right, yeah, Egg Corn. All right, first of all, love the name, and if you could tell us about it in the chat, that'd be great. I was trying to figure it out, but I just couldn't. I was reminded of when I was a kid. My Aunt Rosie would still get like a seltzer delivered every week or whatever, like in those bottles with the and they called them egg creams, but there's really no egg in them. It was just like seltzer and like ice cream and stuff or whatever for, I don't know, old people Bronx stuff. But yeah, I was reminded of that. So, all right, I had them ranked at 5, and I think overall the team is good and has things to like about it. So, Kenneth Walker and Mixon are, a pretty good running back duo. Probably not like what I would love. I would want like one of those type of guys in there. But when you look at the rest of the running backs, Chubb, I think, adds a little more age-related risk that you already are carrying with Mixon. So, like, Chubb's going to be 29 in December. He's coming off a second catastrophic knee injury, right? And, like, how many miracles can you pull, right? How many times can doctors sew the 3 tendons just right for the tightness and looseness? Anyway, so, and you're already onboarding a 27-year-old, Joe Mixon, who, yes, is on a great offense this year that may produce touchdowns, but he may be touchdown dependent. All the explosives might come from the passing game. So, I don't know that I would roster all those guys at once. There's a wide range of outcomes on Javonte, but, as we get closer and closer to the season, a lot of, smart people are, pointing to the bull case for him. Sean Payton running backs eat a lot and they will catch a lot of passes. And, he's in line to be the 1A there. So he's pretty solid. All in all, it's a little bit of like the plotters kind of running backs, and those aren't the ones that kind of hold up over the year, right? And so, it's not a huge thing in redraft, but it's something, because when you look at the data for who performs well down the stretch, it's not like older second contract running backs. In fact, it's quite the opposite. So it's a balance of trying to win September, but also thinking about your long-term roster, which is why we need to dump some of those kickers and defenses and tight ends and stuff to stash those guys. Because the number one rule in the NFL is chaos. Chaos will inevitably happen. So you want to have a roster that's built to benefit from that chaos. Running backs will get injured. It's 20 car wrecks a game. Some of them are 27, 28 years old. You're going to want some of those guys on your roster. You could, and the reason that we're kind of like joking about the, extra tight ends and extra kickers and stuff like that is they're really, especially in a non-tight end premium, they're not really doing much week to week as far as like winning you weeks. Like tight end, kicker, defense, like least important positions on your roster. So having positional advantages there in some sense, especially in a non-tight end premium, you're kind of burning a roster spot that could be used with something that could hit, could gain value, could benefit from that chaos. You can always find a kicker, a tight end streamer, or something like that if you got injuries and bye weeks. Same thing with quarterback. Quarterback a little more important, and you kind of want to have like someone who can go up against the top quarterback week to week, right? But when it comes to like injuries and bye weeks, you can always grab a Will Levis or a Baker Mayfield and just kind of plug them in for. So that's kind of why we're saying it, in case like you're kind of wondering what we're doing when we talk about this roster construction. So sorry for that tangent, but you've got a lot of great upside at wide receiver. Jamar Chase. Listen, I know the whole contract thing. I don't care. He's going to play. He's going to be awesome. Odunze, high upside there. Flowers, I think the ceiling is capped a little bit there. I tend to be lower than consensus on him, but it's still a good trio with good upside. But there is some shaky floor there. Odunze, a rookie. Chase does have the contract concern, and so some people might be a little more worried about it than I am. And Flowers, if he can't get on the same page with Lamar on those deep passes, you're looking at pretty much a manufactured touch guy who is already theoretically the pass catcher 2 on that team behind Mark Andrews. Your bench at wide receiver is pretty good though. You've got Debo, Pickens, Lockett, and Boyd. I mean, Lockett and Boyd I probably don't really need on a roster this size, but there is some solid stuff there. Ditto for Bowers at tight end. Upside, but I don't want to say shaky floor because I just think he's going to eat in that offense because, like, who else besides him and Devontae? And they're going to line him up in all sorts of ways to get him the ball. But if you did just kind of bake in just the sort of inherent uncertainty of a rookie, this might be a roster where I would carry like, a second tight end like a Hunter Henry or something like that and just in case, but not something I would recommend. And again, you don't need the second quarterback. I think Geno is very undervalued. I think the entire Seattle offense is undervalued this year. But again, you don't need the second quarterback. So what I would do is maybe grab some floor at tight end, maybe sneak in, wide receiver, maybe sneak in, a tight end 2 for a few weeks. And I would shift some of the value out of some of your big ticket running backs, right? So like I would move one of Mixon, Javonte, and Chubb, or, if it's Chubb, probably 2 of them, and kind of try to split that out into adding maybe a little bit more security and certainty at wide receiver, or also in the process, adding some of those exciting young running backs that we've been talking about for a few teams now. So, again, a lot of flat tiers in this league. I had them at 5, they end up at 9. It's pretty interchangeable.
Yeah, Doc. So you had this team at 12. So I want to get your thoughts and what you saw with this team.
Yeah, and it kind of ties into what Dwayne said in the chat here, which I'm going to address. And he said, you say that about tight end as far as not having a backup. But we had many games lost last season due to a lack of production from tight ends in the NFL last year. The drop-off after the top 6 tight ends was drastic and cost several people games. And I'm glad he mentioned that because I deviate from the rest of the panel here, where I do think that on some teams it is important to have a backup if the conditions are met, that some of the guys that are available are a little bit better than what else is available. So what happens sometimes with the single positions like quarterback and tight end, and to a lesser extent kicker and defense, is everybody on the waiver wire is either all dog shit or they're all the same talent level. However, sometimes there's 1 or 2 players who's a standard deviation above dog shit or the rest of the same player. And those players are valuable to have because if you need to replace your starter, then you can pull from that as opposed to having to dive into the waiver wire and essentially getting a total replacement level player. So that's the way that I look at it. And with this team, I think having Brock Bowers as your only tight end, this is a team that could benefit from having somebody else in there just in case, because Brock Bowers is a rookie. You are depending on him to get in there and not only play, but be good. What if he fumbles on his first play and Antonio Pierce decides to bench him for the rest of the game or 2 games or 5 games? It could happen. And then you're diving to the waiver wire. I think that's a non-zero chance of a risk that it could happen. And that's a big position. You can't fill it with anything else. You can't pull from your bench. You have to then go to the waiver wire, drop somebody else. And you're just creating a lot of headaches and problems for yourself that you don't necessarily need to have. Now, once things have established themselves and it's week 7, 8, and you kind of know where you're at, then maybe you can make the decision, hey, I want to shoot for more upside on these guys and things like that. But in the first couple of weeks, it's overreaction time. Things haven't really settled. Things haven't marinated enough. And I think we know what we know going into the season. And then what happens? The games start and everything changes, right? And what we thought we knew, maybe we didn't know, and things can get kind of spooky. So for that reason, I'm also somebody, like, I'm a tight end elitist. Like, I like the Travis Kelce's and the Mark Andrews and the Laportas and the McBrides. Like, I quote unquote reach for those guys because I like that extra production, and I like to have guys that are, 1 or 2 standard deviations above what the majority of the rest of the league is going to have as far as production. And I try to build around that advantage. So, that's another area where we deviate.
Yeah, great breakdown and way to defend the tight end there, because you're right. We've been poo-pooing the tight end all night. But leave it to the Raiders fan to find a way to talk about Brock Bowers.
Well, I love the talent, but, you could have said the same thing about Mike Myers last year and just didn't happen.
Didn't work.
So it's like, we've seen it before. We've seen it with Kyle Pitts. 3 years ago, he was supposed to be the second coming of Jesus Christ, and we're still waiting. It's been a while. We went through a whole pandemic, and we're still waiting.
Yep.
So,
and then you got the flip side with Sam Laporta last year, so you never really know what the tight end position.
I think I have the Pitts team, so I will do my rant then.
All right, let's get to team number 8.
Number 8.
Number 8 team, once again, huge disparity here. Ranked as high as 2, as low as 12. It is Muff Divers. Raul, take it away.
Yeah, now I'm honestly kind of wondering if this team was also auto-drafted based on what we learned on my last team. Just considering that this also does have an extra kicker and DST. It has questionable roster construction for the running backs. I feel like deja vu reviewing Muff Divers, because it's a very similar team to hanging with Hernandez, both from the dual threat QB, the elite young tight end, very strong wide receiver core. I probably just prefer this one a little more, having CeeDee Lamb in there as opposed to Garrett Wilson, and then Marvin Harrison, Drake London. Probably take those two for Nico Collins or Devonta Smith. Not that it matters to compare to one team, you're comparing to 12, and that's just where, when you talk about the running back room, only having Jonathan Brooks, Aaron Jones, and Raheem Mostert on the roster right now, kind of, if it would have been good for this team if they were ranked a little lower by consensus, so they could have ran first for Rico Dowdle, Jalen Wright, Ray Davis, anyone still maybe on there. But yeah, just another one of those teams where, with a few moves like the ones that Jeff did suggest in the last review, those upside RBs that can hit at any time, this team could be on the right track. But as it sits right now, I think it kind of merits a middle of the pack ranking at 8.
Yeah, and you called it, because they said it in the chat that it was an auto-drafted team. So good call by looking at that and being able to pull that from this roster, because you're right. You're auto-drafting, especially on Yahoo. It's going to give you an extra defense or a kicker or two. And yeah, it's just the way that auto-drafts go, unfortunately. Let's see. I had this team at 2, so I loved this team, obviously.
Jeff loves the auto draft in this league.
Yeah, apparently I must love the auto draft. Yeah, looking at the roster, just trying to remember my breakdown on it. Obviously, I saw CeeDee Lamb there, Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, Drake London. Those are all guys that are sort of like my guys this year. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb's everybody's guy this year. He's going as a top wide receiver in fantasy right now. Jonathan Brooks scares me a little bit, already missing at least the first 4 games of the season. But you have Lamar Jackson, the cheat code, the ultimate cheat code. So overall, this roster to me looked like one that I would love to take over. But again, kind of the same thing I mentioned on the last all-drafted team. There's spots there that I'm dropping, and I'm picking up the Jalen Wrights and the running backs that I mentioned before. So this team gets markedly better once you make that happen. So that's why I like this team so much. Brian, I want you to chime in just real quick, because you had this team dead last year. So I wanted to make sure you got your 2 cents in here.
Yeah, I think obviously what y'all have pointed to with the sort of extra, flotsam and jetsam, with the kickers and defense. But, this is and it's a really super fragile running back group. I mean, like, you have Brooks who's out for 4 weeks and then has to ramp up after that. Aaron Jones, aging, declining efficiency, and then you only have 3 total. Like, I don't know, it's just not something that I would roll out. But obviously, they were auto drafted.
Yeah, that does make a difference for sure. All right, moving right along. Let's get to team number 7.
Number 7.
Number 7, ranked as high as 3, as low as 11. It is DBT Kirkwood. And Doc, you had them the highest, and this is your team. You had them at 3.
Yeah, I like this team a lot. I see the chat is still going with the do you have a backup tight end or shouldn't you have a backup tight end? Hey guys, reasonable people can disagree, but all I like to say is that the idea of playing too scared is another way of saying I don't like to take on too much risk in the beginning of the season. I like to kind of play it out for a few weeks and then start taking my upside chances when it gets closer to the playoffs, try to get hot and win a championship. So, that's the way I'm going to defend it. But, I get it. You play how you want to play, and I'm here for it. Now, with DBT Kirkwood, when I looked at this team, the first thing that jumped out to me was the top of the lineup. And seeing Jalen Hurts and CMC, Christian McCaffrey there, they could easily be the QB1 overall and the running back 1 overall this year. And I know some people are allegedly down on CMC because he's a year older and the touches and the wear and the tear and the injuries and blah, blah, blah. But they've been saying that for like 3 years now. And his upside is so big that if he does stay healthy, that to me is worth the risk. And unlike in Dynasty, you really only need to have him stay healthy for part of one season, specifically down the stretch of the regular season and into the playoffs to have him pay off for you, as opposed to multiple seasons in Dynasty, which I concede is a lot harder to project. I think Mike Evans' ability to just roll out of bed every year and score double-digit touchdowns is very underrated. And in the playoffs last year, we saw Amari Cooper's literal league-winning upside when he hung almost a 50-burger in the semis. And sure, he missed the finals the following week, but he almost assuredly got you there first before bowing out due to injury. I love Scary Terry McLaurin's upside with a new quarterback, new coaching staff, and offensive scheme, and even the target competition of Jahan Dotson, if you were still high on him, getting shipped out of town helps. I think Dallas Goedert's another underrated tight end. He's finished as a half PPR tight end 1 3 out of the last 5 years, and there's that sneaky stack with Jalen Hurts there as a sweetener as well. Kicker-wise, Younghoe Koo might end up being the best kicker in the league, and the Texans defense should be solid as well. Now, while I can't say that Kyron Williams at running back gives me the warm and fuzzies this year, given Sean McVay's recent handling of Cam Akers, and now having his alleged bell cow starting running back returning punts, like what's that about? But even if he doesn't repeat what he did last year, one or both of Zamir White and Jalen Warren off the bench should at least ensure some solid production from the RB2 slot, so that's fine. Brandon Cooks gives you some wide receiver veteran floor for the bye weeks and injuries, and Jalen Polk and Roman Wilson give some nice rookie upside for later in the year. And there's even Taysom Hill, who, if you're going to have a backup tight end, this guy with tight end eligibility has been getting used all over the formation as a tight end, a goal line back, a wide receiver, a quarterback. I think they have him running concessions. He's managing the cap. They got him doing everything there. And granted, you never know when you're going to play him, but if you pick the right week, he's got easy top 3 tight end upside, and no one else at the position available as late as he is has nearly as much ceiling on a week-to-week basis. And honestly, this team might have been ranked even higher for me if they didn't draft the nasty man, Deshaun Watson, as a backup quarterback. And shout out to Danny Ocean from Speak On It Tuesday nights on Going42, another great show, who gave him that nickname. And oh yeah, we're going there. I mean, when I saw that, for me, it was like seeing somebody get a brand new Lamborghini with how much I love this team and then deciding to paint the Dayglow lime green. I mean, sure, if that's your thing, fine. But for me, I want to be on the right side of history here. And much more importantly, I recognize that the fantasy gods are fickle, and I want all the karma and the vibes to be good, especially if I have a strong playoff contender like I think this team is, and I want Lady Luck on my side in a close playoff matchup. So aside from the aforementioned nasty man, I really like this team a lot, and I can easily see multiple pathways where DBT Kirkwood could absolutely lay the lumber on the rest of this league en route to a fantasy championship this year.
Yeah, I'm looking at my rankings, and I'm like, why did I have this team at 11? Because this team is really good, like you mentioned. I mean, Jalen Hurts, Christian McCaffrey, Kyron Williams, even if they just, do what they did, last year, even like not even the full extent, but just the amount of touches that they were getting with Christian McCaffrey and Kyron Williams, I think leading the league in touches. That's a pretty solid roster. I had him at 11. I was the lowest on them, and I'm not really sure what I was looking at when I did that. Maybe I ignored the top half of the roster and broke down the rest of it. I'm not really sure. Raul, you have this team kind of in the middle of the pack there. Give me a couple thoughts what you have on this team.
Yeah, I mean, I think the doc said it all, and me too. To have it 7, I am confused of what I was looking before, because the top 3 could win you any week on their own. You know, you could almost pencil in like 60 points a week from Hurts, McCaffrey, and Kyron. If it goes as we probably expect them to. It may have been a little bit of dynasty brain for myself, because the ages of that wide receiver core, I would have some values that this team maybe peaks early in the season, and then injury risk plus the potential aging out of Evans, Cooper, McLaurin could come to play towards the end of the season. But as long as you're staying on top of both the activity in your league, the waiver wire, low end wide receiver production is very easily replaceable in PPR. So I wouldn't be too worried. 7, yeah, maybe just in that kind of mess of the middle tier of this league, but it's a very strong team with the Hammers at the top.
Agreed. All right, number 6.
Number 6.
Number 6 team ranked as high as 4, as low as 9. It is Devastator. Raul, this is your team.
Yeah, again, a very similar team, very strong at the running back position, going with Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, and Josh Jacobs. Be very interesting to know when this league was drafted, because, of course, Jacobs has gotten a lot of push up in the last week. But having 3 players that I would pretty solidly pencil in from, anywhere from RB6 to RB12, you could have 3 of those guys there. And anytime you're lining up with 3 RB1s, you feel pretty good in a matchup. Going to the wide receiver room, missed Rashee Rice in the initial look through at least our spreadsheet, but when you pop him into the lineup, that looks extremely strong as well. I'd probably also say that I'm a little higher on DK Metcalf than consensus. I'm a really big fan of what Ryan Grubb could bring to this system. And then I really like some just very smart picks down the bench. Jaden Reed, Jacoby Myers, D-Hop, even Adonai Mitchell getting a lot of steam after we saw his preseason usage and the injury to Josh Downs. I think there are a lot of great pieces on this team. QB room, I think there's some room to maneuver here, though I like both guys, and that's really the issue. It's 2 guys. Kyler Murray and Jordan Love I would have solidly as at least top 10 quarterbacks. It is 6-point passing touchdown. Maybe take a look at the Tua manager, the Herbert manager, and there's one more, Trevor Lawrence manager, who I maybe would count outside of having a QB 10, top 10 QB, I should say. Maybe you can make a little bit of a marginal move to improve the rest of your team there. But yeah, top to bottom, very strong team, good depth as well. I had them at 6, and yeah, like I said on the last comment, the last one, DBT Kirkwood, it could be anywhere from, 3 to 8. It's just that strong of a middle tier in this league.
Yeah, agreed. Doc, you had this team at 4. What are your thoughts on this team here? And he kind of went QB early with Kyler and Jordan Love. How do you feel about having those 2 QBs?
I like this team. It's like maybe it's an age thing again. But when I looked at it, it was like, I just felt really good about the depth, the fact that he had, some potential elite performers, even if they were a little bit on the older side. And, it kind of gears towards like how I like to build teams. And I think that, Jordan Love is going to be very good, but I really, really like Kyler Murray. And I think that he's going way, way later this year than he should be. I understand, the injuries and stuff like that, but, his elite rushing upside, especially in a 1 quarterback league, especially in a 6-point passing and rushing touchdown league, like he's got lots of ways to get home, and, adding Marvin Harrison Jr. only helps. So, I think that there's potential, even though it's hard to trade in leagues like this, that you could potentially have Kyler Murray blow up and be like a top 3 quarterback, and have Jordan Love be like a top 5 quarterback. And now you got something, and you can really make some moves, maybe make a package deal, lose the battle to win the war kind of trade, and just really chunk up for down the stretch and going into the playoffs. And not a lot of teams have that opportunity to do that without kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul sort of trade. So, that was one of the things that I really liked about it. Do they have a little bit more risk than maybe some other teams because of the age? Yeah, but, it's redraft, and I tend to be okay with that. And I tend to lean more towards getting that production at least early in the season, because you can have, and we're going to talk about it in a little bit, so foreshadowing alert, you can have really great upside, but if you start out 1-4 or 2-5, you might not get home to the playoffs for that upside to really kick in. So, those veterans, even though nobody likes them, except for me, of course, they do give you that nice floor that can kind of get you over the rocky waters in the beginning of the season. And, if you're 5-5 going into down the stretch and then you're really kicking into high gear, that's when you want your team to be firing on all cylinders. So, I like this team a lot.
Yeah, good stuff. All right. Number 5.
Number 5.
Number 5 team, pretty big disparity here. Once again, as low as 11, as high as 2. It is Stairway to Evans. Doc, take it away.
Yeah, Stairway to Evans. Great name, by the way. So, I was the person that ranked this team, the lowest, and we'll get to why. So when I looked at the roster, even though I liked a lot of the players, I got left with a lot of questions, and they were a lot more questions than I would want heading into a season in a redraft league. And that's the reason for the lower ranking. And again, these rankings don't reflect our feelings on the team quality. It's about the order of teams that we want to take over. And that being said, I really like a lot of the players on this team, and I think it could do very well. It has a lot of upside. My issue had more to do with the construction and the prospects for the early part of the season, which I just alluded to. And will you have enough juice to get you through the first part of the year in order to let that upside potential kick into high gear for you? So I'll explain. I looked at running back, and honestly, it's not strong, but I'm totally fine with that. I build a lot of teams just like this, and I just kind of try to cobble together production as the season goes on. And I think you should be able to do that with Rachaad White as your lead back to start. And betting on the fickleness of Sean McVay and against a Kyron repeat, I don't mind that. And hoping that Blake Corum hits big is great. But if it doesn't happen right away, Zach Moss should do fine in Cincinnati. Tyler Algier will get his in Atlanta, even if Bijan blows up like most of us expect. And Austin Eckler has an, in case of PPR, emergency break glass ability to score double-digit points any given week. Fine, great. However, when I see a running back core like this, I want to be blown away at most, if not all, the other positions. And candidly, there are a lot of good players, but I wasn't blown away, except the kicker and defense. They're great. But when I'm lauding you on your kicker and defense picks in the first few minutes of discussing a redraft team, well, we got issues. So Amon-Ra St. Brown, love him. No notes, full stop. One quarterback was C.J. Stroud. No problem here, but I don't think he's significantly that different than Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott, T-Law, Jordan Love, and he lacks the upside of Hurts, Allen, Lamar, Anthony Richardson, and Kyler Murray, and he lacks the upside of Mahomes. So he'll be good, but realistically, top 5 to 6 ceiling in the league is middle of the pack, and if he regresses for whatever reason, he doesn't really have the rushing upside to bail you out. Puka Nacua is coming off a historic season, which is amazing. Can he approach anything like that with a healthier Cooper Kupp and the league having a whole offseason to study him? I don't know. Brian Thomas could absolutely be a stud, but rookies can start slow. So, okay, you throw in Godwin instead, which is fine, but after him, 3 more question marks. Shakir, love him. Loved his usage with Brady as OC. Does it continue? Shrug. Jerry Jeudy, lots of potential. He's had QB issues. He's been hurt. Can he finally put it together? Shrug. Jahan Dotson, dynasty darling, underperforming to date and on a better offense now, but does he actually do anything this year without an injury? Double shrug. And last, but certainly not least, the tight end, Mark Andrews, who's a beast, and parenthetically, prior to last year, was the only tight end not named Travis Kelce to finish as the tight end overall. The tight end 1 overall dating back to checks notes 2016. But he only played 10 games last year, and then there was that car accident where he allegedly wasn't hurt, but missed basically the whole preseason that nobody's really talking about. Is there something more there? I'd certainly feel a lot better with a little insurance early on at the tight end position until I'm sure that he's right and doing what I hope he can in the Ravens offense. So this would be one of those teams where I wouldn't hate seeing a backup tight end just for a week or two to make sure that Mark Andrews is actually right, and I don't have to go dumpster diving at tight end after week 2 or 3 after the wire's been picked over. So would I have loved to see somebody like Isaiah Likely in here as a backup? Yes, I would. Would I feel better with an upside play like Tyler Conklin instead of a 6 wide receiver? Also, yes. If you decide not to move on that now, I get it. People play differently. That's fine. But just to tuck away, you guys paid all your money to be here. Some guys like Mike Gesicki, Jonnu Smith, Tucker Kraft, Ben Sinnott, should still be on the wire for a little while if needed. And if you wanted to let things play out as is, you can go pick them up later. So there you have it. Again, I like a lot of the players on this team, but in a redraft league early on, I want less volatility and less playing time or production questions. But look, if a lot of those questions get answered in a good way, Stairway to Evans could ascend straight to heaven with a high playoff seed and maybe even a championship game berth. But if things break bad and you end up in an early hole, those issues could compound and send this squad on an express elevator to the basement. So that being said, I wish you the best of luck this year, and come back next year and tell us how it worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a great breakdown there. And, looking at the roster, and obviously I run this through a Fantasy Pros and then puts it into a spreadsheet. And the players that I have as starters are not the players that he currently has as starters on his roster. But I was looking at the Rashad White, Blake Corum, Austin Eckler, Zach Moss running back room, and that's why I had him at 8. I had him pretty low, not quite as low as you, Doc, but that running back room scares me because essentially that makes Rashad White your RB1, and that scares me just in general to have him as your best running back because I do think he regresses quite a bit this season. So that's why I was pretty down on him. Other than that, the roster is great. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Puka Nacua, C.J. Stroud are all studs. Mark Andrews, assuming he's healthy, is going to be a stud as well. He's got some good upside guys, like you mentioned, on his bench. Chris Godwin's on his bench as well, so he can move into that starting lineup. So yeah, great breakdown overall. Brian and Raul were on the opposite spectrum of things. They had him at 2 and 5, so that kind of shows the disparity and the different way we like to build our rosters and how our rankings are all different. All right, we are up to number.
Oh, sorry, Jeff. In the comments, I know JJ's in here. He said that Isaiah Likely was drafted. I did see that. I just said I would have liked to see him a lot better on this team specifically because
of Mark Andrews.
You just kind of plug and play, and I think you got another tight end 1 there. But I don't know. Maybe you work out a little trade or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, good call. All right, number 4.
Number 4.
Number 4 team ranked as high as 1, as low as 10. It is the Big Green. And Brian, you had this team at 1, so it is your team. Let's hear it.
Yeah, like I said before, sometimes like the first 4 for me are kind of flat. This happened to end up number 1. Dak at quarterback is fine in a 1 QB league, especially in a 6 point pass TD league. He's going to be throwing like 600 times this year, so he'll probably be okay there. It's not a great running back group, but what I like about it is it's not super fragile and has some sneaky upside. I'm lower than consensus on Etienne, but he will produce. Maybe not at the price you paid, but he'll produce. Benson, James Conner, he's very good. They're going to play him every down for the most part, and the thing is about him, people say like, oh, he's never played however many games in a season. He's also never played below 10, but there's probably going to be a spot in the season where Benson's going to be useful for you for a couple weeks. So, he's fine to have. Swift is kind of polarizing this year. I'm kind of neutral on him for once, but some smart people are making the bull case for him. And Hubbard is going to be more valuable later into the year than people think. I love Jonathan Brooks, but I love him in Dynasty and Best Ball. When it comes to redraft, I'm a little cooler on him because he's going to miss the first 4 games, and he can't technically practice with the team. So then you're talking about the ramp up. Then you're talking about a team that has no 2024 aspirations, so has no incentive to really play him a lot this year. And I think Chuba is going to be more valuable later into the year than people realize. So I like that. They're a sneaky upside. Very good starting trio of wide receivers with Tyreek, DJ Moore, and Tank Dell. Each has, their pros and cons, but, as far as a starting trio goes, that's very good. And, you have some depth guys that I'm higher on than most people, especially JSN and JMO. Bateman I could do without. Kincaid, huge upside at tight end. Like, he could be easily the tight end 1 this year. And, I want as much Kincaid as I can this year. You don't need a second tight end, as we've been saying, but if you're going to have a second tight end, Isaiah Likely is a good one to have. The say what you will about preseason buzz and info, but it's all we have to go on. There's some talk of him getting in there in the slot while Andrews is there. Also in the slot, like playing like a spread or 12 personnel, or you have Andrews in line, he's in the slot, And, we don't talk much about like contingency upside with tight ends, right? Like we usually only talk about that with running backs and to a certain extent wide receivers. But if there's one tight end who has extreme contingency upside, it's, I think, Isaiah Likely. So, he's kind of like a nice little zero RB version of tight end. So if I'm going to carry a second, it's going to be a guy like him, and he's explosive with his upside, right? So, and again, you don't need a second quarterback with Carr. So I would add some upside running backs by moving off of Bateman and Carr. Like that doesn't necessarily have to be a trade. I don't think many people are going to want them, but those are the first two guys I'm cutting, and I'm going to the waiver wire for, some of the running back names we've talked about before. But otherwise, like, I think this has like the fewest holes and concerns for me. It's like, and then I see exciting guys that I like, Benson and Tank Dell and Dalton Kincaid and JSN, who I'm like, to the moon on this year. So yeah, I would really love taking over this team.
Yeah, I'm with you. I had this team ranked at 5, and I'm on the JSN train as well. I've talked about him in multiple weeks on my show on Wednesday nights, talking about his supposedly down rookie year or not impressive rookie year. I think when you're a rookie as on a team where you're the third option and you get 93 targets, how down can you really be, right? So I love JSN. This team is, solid overall, great starting roster there with Dak Prescott, Tyreek Hill, Travis Etienne, DJ Moore, all top guys there. So yeah, solid roster for sure. The Big Green did a good job building his roster. So shout out to you for sure. All right, moving on to team number 3. Number 3 team ranked as high as 2, as low as 9. It is Company Man, and the Doc. Not quite sure what you were doing in the background over there, but you are back now. So this is your squad.
There was a grasshopper got in here, so we had to terminate him with extreme prejudice. So if any members of PETA are watching and paid for this, I apologize. So Company Man, with this team, let's start at the top. Patrick Mahomes, who is the best quarterback in the NFL, and in a 6-point per passing league, is a threat to throw 50-plus touchdowns and be the quarterback 1 overall any year. Throwing the stack on this team with the fastest man in the NFL, rookie Xavier Worthy. And candidly, I'm really excited to see if they can do like a Pat and Tyreek 2.0 thing this year, really put up some monster numbers together. Cooper Kupp is no stranger to monster numbers himself and should be back to putting up even more of them after 2 injury-marred seasons. Jalen Waddle's back at practice and looking good, and he's an explosive playmaker on an even more explosive offense. And even if that mystery injury kind of resurfaces, Calvin Ridley or Cortland Sutton should be able to hold down the fort with some solid numbers at wide receiver of their own. Jahmyr Gibbs, absolute stud. And despite starting slow last year and missing a few games with injury, once he got his feet wet, it was wheels up with a RB10 overall finish. So if he can keep that same pace over 14 or 15 games this year, he has legit top 3 upside at the position. Najee Harris and Arthur Smith have been much maligned individually, and maybe rightfully so. And as much as you might want to trash old Arthur as a head coach, we've seen him run an offense in Tennessee, and those offenses could definitely tote the rock. So with him and with Najee Harris, that could be a match made in running back scoring points heaven. Even if that doesn't work out, I like James Conner as a solid producer off the bench. And even my boy, fellow Jersey boy and fellow panel member, Brian Ford, can't help but sing the praises of Ty Chandler like he did on a running back sleeper show we did a few weeks ago together. And candidly, he sold me on his upside there too. I really like Jake Ferguson at tight end to be low-key as high as the second receiving option on a high-scoring offense in Dallas. And I have Dallas Schultz just inside my tight end 1 rankings as well. While the Eagles' defense might not be a top squad in this league, they should be more than fine. And Jake Elliott should score lots of points in that offense and has the leg to boom them from deep to get you those extra bonus points to boot, pun intended. Is that enough praise? Because I'm not done. This squad is even backed up their future Hall of Fame quarterback with another future Hall of Fame quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, and the number 1 overall pick in the draft this past year, Caleb Williams. Now, do I think that maybe you should see how they do and either trade one or both of them if your quarterbacks are all lighting it up, or just drop one if they stink or get hurt and pick up something like an upside running back? Well, let's just say I'd give those things some serious thought in a week or 3. But for now, I'm fine to just let all this marinate as week 1 approaches. And if you guys decide to re-up and do another PLP next year, and we do hope that you do, it's easy for me to envision Company Man, other squads in this league, the pink slip, and be in the company of a league championship trophy when we talk again next year.
Yeah, this team is pretty solid. Again, looking at my rankings, I'm wondering what I was looking at. I mean, I guess maybe I looked at those 3 quarterbacks and thought maybe that's just way too many quarterbacks. But when you got Patrick Mahomes, do you really need a second quarterback? But if you're gonna get one, get Aaron Rodgers or Caleb Williams. He's got both of them there. So Najee Harris, you mentioned him. I'm high on Najee Harris this year. I do think that he is a little bit the pendulum has swung too far the other direction. I know he wasn't as good as we thought he was, but now it seems like the hate has gone too much the other direction. You can get him at a super value, so I think he's going to be fine. Jake Ferguson, me and Ryan both on my podcast on Wednesday have talked about him, and he could be like you mentioned, the second target on that offense that's going to throw the ball a billion times. So yeah, Jake Ferguson is wheels up. I think Ryan actually made a bold prediction that he would be a top 3 tight end this year. I'm not quite ready to make that proclamation yet, but the potential is there with that many targets. So yeah, great breakdown there of Company Man. Moving on to team number 2. Number 2 team ranked as high as 1 and as low as 8. It is Super Mario Crystal Ballin. And Raul, this is your squad.
Yeah, so I had this team ranked actually at 3, so tended towards the higher end of the rankings amongst the group. But I think it's easy to see why one may love this team. And maybe this is dynasty brain, but I mean, I'm honestly all in on this core for 2024. And let's just start with Bijan Robinson and Devon Achane as the running back 1 and 2, potentially 2 top 5 running backs right there at the start. And I mean, I don't think any team in this league can match that. Now, there is a bit of fragility with Achane, but we're taking over the teams. We're ranking the teams in the order we'd like to take them over, and I like to win. And this team has, the 2 front runners to help a team get that league title. So very strong there. Moving down other running backs, Brian Robinson, I think perfectly fine, probably the price that he was acquired. J.K. Dobbins, I will say that I've probably been on the Gus Bus and Kimani Vidal trains, and maybe this is one where I might be completely off just following the camp reports and usage. I know Gus had a surgery in the offseason, but definitely seems like JK made it through preseason, which was a worry considering that he only got $50K guaranteed, but he's here at week 1. So I like that room there. Now the wide receivers, Malik Neighbors and Chris Olave, I mean, obviously see from a dynasty point of view in 2024, maybe below consensus, to be honest, on both of them, but I will acknowledge both Neighbors and Olave have that, low-end wide receiver 1 ceiling as early as 2024 and are both locked into volume, which keeps up the floor. So maybe from a more of a roster construction point of view, I do like having those 2 after Bijan and Achane. Even if I don't particularly like Neighbors and Olave at cost now that the team's assembled, I'm fine with that construction. And then tight end, it's a team with 2 tight ends. Do we actually know, Jeff, they have injury reserve spots in this league?
I don't believe they do. Let me scroll down on the screen here, but I don't think they do.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a tough one then, because I mean, I actually love David Njoku. He's definitely a tight end I'm targeting at cost. So how quickly we forget this is the tight end 1 in the NFL for the last 10 weeks of the 2023 season, and all the buzz really is coming out that Njoku projects to be the second target on the Cleveland Browns. So fine with Njoku, probably will drop Hawkinson if it were me, considering we don't have the injury reserve spot. And I think something does need to be done about the roster construction, where it could come from, just as an option to drop. But yeah, the depth does fall off. There is a ton of upside, just with those rookie wide receivers, 4 of them, which you don't normally see on a redraft team. But I can maybe see where you were plugged into Dynasty Twitter or what have you. I mean, Lad McConkey is someone that I really like, not just the player, but I especially like the fit on that Harbaugh offense. I think he'll do a lot of what we saw Roman Wilson do in college last year. So I think that's going to be a good option. But, beyond that, the depth does really fall off. Not to worry too much because, like I said earlier, like wide receiver production is very easily replaceable from the wire. So even some names, Demarcus Robinson or Andre Yoshivas, especially with the Chase stuff in the air, they're on the waiver wire. Wouldn't mind adding them just to keep your team afloat if you do need to like navigate some tough waters in the early part of the season. But they do have one IR spot, so pop Hawkinson over there, easy move to make. But yeah, just to sum it all up, I just really love the upside on this team with those key players, the core. I didn't touch on the QB room, but I mean, this is perfect, really. Jaden Daniels is one that tie it all back. Like, we don't really like having two QBs in a one QB league, but Jaden Daniels is one where I don't mind taking that second swing just to protect from Daniels, not just straight up bust potential, but also his injury potential. Maybe the doc will have something to say about that, but I mean, I'd be really worried about Daniels staying healthy for the whole year. But then when he can back him up with Justin Herbert, another one is just fallen down the ADP, probably both acquired at cheap prices. So I think that's fine. Yeah. So a lot of upside, some fragility, but I think my ranking of 3 towards that top end of the table, I really like the ceiling of this team as someone that could take it all home.
Yeah, so I had this team ranked at number 1, and I think looking at the team, it's because I have a team very similar to this team where I drafted Justin Herbert. I have Bijan Robinson. I have Brian Robinson. I have Keon Coleman. I have Malik Neighbors. Like, it's this almost the exact same team that I drafted. I actually named them Danger B Robinson because you got Brian Robinson and Bijan Robinson. I don't know if they're old enough in the chat to get that reference or not. I know Doc smiled. He got the reference for sure. But yeah, this team is very close to what, and I actually count 5 rookies. I know you said 4 rookies, but I actually count 5. McConkey, Jaden Daniels, of course, is there. Keon Coleman, Burton, and Leggett are all rookies, and Malik Neighbors. So there's actually 6 rookies. Whew, maybe I got a little sucked into the dynasty brain there as well with all those rookies on the team. It's a very volatile team, but one that if the guys hit can definitely pay off for sure. All right, we have reached the number 1 spot.
Number one.
Number 1 team ranked as high as number 1, as low as number 6. It is 2 boobs, 2 balls, 1 goal. Brian, this is your team. Bring us home.
I wonder what the goal is. Let the record show that I ranked the team high 4 that has Zeke and Gus and Kamara on it. So just let the record show, right? Okay. I think you've got obviously very good upside players with Josh Allen. I actually identified him as a possible bust at cost this year, but he's still going to be a top 5 quarterback. Breece Hall could be the running back 1 overall. AJ Brown, I think, is going to explode this year even further in the Kellen Moore offense and some of the changes that they're going to make to that offense. Pitts, he's my dynasty tight end 1, but even in redraft, I think he's definitely a guy like you want to take an upside swing at a onesie like that. So, I won't bore you with all the details, but when it comes to Pitts, even people who were off Pitts early are back in on him now because the conditions around him have changed and the cost has decreased. Being out on Kyle Pitts at cost in 2024 could be one of the biggest fantasy football mistakes that people make. The upside is just through the roof. They're gonna fix the ADOT. They're gonna use him better, and they're gonna use him in more snaps. Again, obviously there's some unknowns, right? We have a 37-year-old coming off an Achilles, and we don't know what Zach Robinson is as an offensive coordinator. They didn't use much motion and RPO in preseason, but really, when you look at the 2 sides of the ledger, like Pitts, I think is the type of bet that you want to make in a league like this. Now, you also have, besides those high upside players, maybe even T. Higgins too, especially if, we have a Chase out for a few games. Besides that, though, you have some very mid and or dusty players with Kamara, Diggs, Gus, and Zeke. Those are pretty dusty. I mean, some people are in on Diggs more than I am this season. And, there is the argument of who else but Kamara, on there, but it's just guys that I don't want to roster. I build even in redraft. It's not really dynasty brain. I build hero RB and zero RB in redraft. I just think over time the data shows that that's the way to go. And so like I just pulled up a recent redraft that I did, and I didn't take my first running back until the 8th round, right? But I took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the last 7 rounds, right? And that's just just how I like to do it. I'm going to win the flex. I'm going to win the higher ceiling positions, which is wide receiver. And oh, by the way, I still have Murray and Pitts as my onesies in that league. So I think I did pretty good. But anyway, getting back to this team, again, there's no need for a second quarterback or tight end with Purdy and Henry. And Charb is, I think, one of those good running backs to roster that can benefit from chaos and occasionally even have some standalone. So with this team, really, I would just get off some of those dusty guys for some higher upside guys, and maybe fix some wide receiver depth there. Demario Douglas is fine, especially in PPR, but he's pretty mid. But I mean, yeah. Again, we kind of had, I think, for me, a fairly flat, like 1 through 6-ish. So I've got this team kind of right in the middle there at 4. And I like the roster, and despite the dusty guys.
Well, speaking of dusty guys, the Doc has this one at number 1. Doc loves the dusty guys. Doc, give us your thoughts here.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what Brian said, but I really see the upside. I'm surprised he didn't mention. Did you mention Alvin Kamara? Because we on the show that we did, it was one of the ones we talked about that we significantly disagreed upon. Where I still think he has a decent amount left in the tank, and Brian definitely does not. And I don't really have a problem with having Brock Purdy as a backup quarterback. Like I said, it's like everybody says, hey, there's no need to have this guy on the roster because you have this other player who's really good until the game start and guys start getting hurt. And then it's like, oh shit, it's week 2 and I have 4 guys that are injured and I'm taking zeros. And, people say that's playing scared, but the way I look at it is the NFL, the regular season, it's like a minefield. So if like you put 50 yards of landmines out in front of me and you say, all right, I want you to run down that field as fast as you can. Don't plan or anything. Don't worry about where you're going to step. Just run. And if you don't, then you're playing scared. And I'm like, maybe I want to think about it a little bit. So that's kind of the way that I approach it. But I really like this team. I really like the upside. I like the veteran presence. And I like that there's a lot of guys here that I think could significantly overperform, kind of where they were taken. And that's why I rank them number 1.
Good stuff. I had them ranked the lowest, and I think it's because of some of those dusty guys that Brian had talked about. And seeing Stephon Diggs, I'm like Brian. I'm out on Stephon Diggs this year. I think especially at cost. Seeing him in the starting lineup kind of scared me a little bit. I do like Breece Hall, Josh Allen. I mean, how do you not like those guys? But yeah, to me, it was just a little bit too top heavy, and just not enough guys that I feel like I can really count on. I'm also high on Pitts as well, so those are 3 guys that you can lean on. But again, with all these rosters, I think anybody and anytime could win this league. There's definitely not a team where I'm like, this team is definitely not going to be able to make the playoffs. I think even the team we had at 12, we saw a lot of the disagreements as far as rankings go. I think overall this team did a pretty good job drafting. Riley, you got anything you wanted to add real quick to the team, this last team here before we get to our dark horses?
Yeah, I mean, I had them at 1, 2, and really for much of the similar reasons that we've already discussed. I mean, T. Higgins is, I think, my 3rd highest rostered player in best ball this year. So even without all the chase stuff, I think how quickly we forget. I mean, T. Higgins was pushing a second round like redraft pick last year, and there are a lot of like interesting splits you need to take with T. Higgins because he has these weird games where he's like played 1 snap or 3 snaps or off the field by like 30% of the snaps. And if you actually like isolate, this is cherry picking it away, but like he has produced as a borderline wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2 in the past with Burrow. And I think on a contract year, this is a sneaky guy from ADP of wide receiver 24 to finish borderline top 12. So yeah, I really love this team from top to bottom. I think the best of, what is a good a top tier, but I think this is my favorite team here.
All right, good stuff. All right, that is the rankings. We'll do a quick dark horse teams here. So this is a redraft league, so we're picking teams that we think can win this league that we ranked a little bit lower than they hoped they would got ranked. Doc, I'm gonna go to you first here. You got a dark horse team for us?
Yeah, I'm going to go all the way back to the, kick it back to the beginning. I really like Bench Burrow and Deal. I know we had him ranked last overall, but There's just something about like the team here. It's like I really like having Travis Kelce at tight end. I think Joe Burrow could be good. I like the wide receivers. I like the running backs. I like the upside on the bench. So, and I like the contingency upside even with having, Doubs and Dontavian Wicks. I think there's a pretty good chance that one of them can emerge and be something really good. And, if the other one doesn't, then you can cut them, or maybe they're both really good. Joshua Palmer, I think, is being underrated. He could still be the number one wide receiver, for the LA Chargers for whatever that's worth. I like Mike Williams to, come back from the ACL. And, if Aaron Rodgers is healthy and Mike Williams is healthy, I think that the ex-deep threat receiver on an Aaron Rodgers-led team, as Christian Watson fans will attest to, can be pretty good. So, I really like the team. And, I'm kind of wondering what you guys are smoking, ranking them this low.
All right, Brian, you got a dark horse?
I mean, I can show the doc what I've been smoking after the show if you want. But Eggcorn, yeah, I had him ranked 5, and I think it's one of those things where if things break right for this team, or even just a few of those things break right for this team, if Chubb holds up and is useful for you at an important time of the year, if George Pickens is actually a good football, I'm just kidding, but I just don't like Pickens. But if Odunze, sooner rather than later becomes the wide receiver 2 and then wide receiver 1 on Chicago, if Mixon is getting a lot of touchdowns in that offense, if Kenneth Walker is going to be used the way the coaches are saying he's going to be used a little bit differently this year, Tua is attached to Tyreek and Waddle. Waddle's poised for a great year, great per route numbers last year. Like he just gets dinged up. If Bowers is the beast that I think he is, right? So there's a lot of things that it just, if a few of them break right, this team could make some noise.
Yeah, I like it. Rallo, what you got for your dark horse?
Eggcorn was the one I was going to go with as well. I had them in 9th in my initial rankings. And I mean, like Ryan said, and really this applies to all the teams. If you just need to have a few things break right for you, that could be individual week by week, or, an injury here, run of form there, and suddenly you're in the playoffs, and it's anyone's game at that point. But yeah, I really Brian said it all, and so the only thing I'd probably add, there are a lot of good skill player depth pieces here that I like. Deebo Samuel probably slots right into the starting lineup, but George Pickens, another option. Javonte Williams, that I admittedly was too low on to start the summer, and now have moved up to right at the RB2 tier. In a league like this, where we've seen a lot of teams roster second QBs and then sit through an hour of us shitting on the decision to roster a second QB.
Speak for yourself. Speak for yourselves. Not all of us shit on that idea. Just for the record.
A 75% shitstorm on the second QB. If you can make that smart move with a Javonte pops off, maybe try to foreshadow or get ahead of an estimate breakout or whatever. But if you can send Javonte to get that upgrade, that could be the final piece to push this team over the line. And then, just all the reasons that Brian said, individual player takes. I think Ken Walker, another one that's grown on me as the offseason's gone on. Really like a lot of pieces. So despite the 9th ranking, I can see it really work out for Eggcorn here.
Yeah, so the team that I'm picking as my dark horse is almost like me trying to self-correct, because I had this team ranked at 11. DBT Kirkwood. Looking at the roster once again, I don't know what I was looking at. Maybe I mistakenly put it in the wrong column or something. But Jalen Hurts, Christian McCaffrey, Kyron Williams, Mike Evans, Amari Cooper, Terry McLaurin, all solid guys in that starting roster. And you got the upside of Christian McCaffrey and Jalen Hurts there. The team is just solid overall. On your bench, you've got Zamir White, Jalen Warren. I don't know what I was looking at when I looked at this roster, but I do like this one a lot more than I do now that we're breaking them down. So DBT Kirkwood would be my dark horse. All right, fellas, that wraps the podcast up. I want to thank all the people that were in the chat tonight. We had some lively people in the chat from the league and some other guys as well. So appreciate y'all tuning in tonight. Please hit that like and subscribe button on the YouTube channel for us. We'll go around the room, guys, real quick. Give us your Twitter handle where we can follow you at, and anything you want to plug. We'll go to you first, Brian.
At FFJunkie _ on the Twitters. Saturday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern here on this YouTube channel. I do a live Dynasty show with Josh Walker. And then midweek, audio-only Dynasty podcast called Dynasty Fever. You can follow that show at Dynasty Fever Pod if you're into the Dynasty thing. That's a little more long form, a little more humorous tangents and stuff like that. But we love it and we have fun, so you should too.
Good stuff, Raul.
Yeah, first of all, just thank you, Jeff, for having me on. Thank you both to Brian and the Doc for a great hour. And of course, thank you to the league for getting one of these PLPs. One of my favorite forms of podcasts to do, really an extension of the other podcast I do on Going for2, and that is the fantasy assessment, which is more team by team focused. But yeah, just overall had a great night. And yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at SmallTalkFF. Fantasy Assessment, the podcast will now be switching to a weekly cadence, Friday nights. Can't remember the time off the top of my head because we haven't had one yet, but Friday nights on Going for2. And yeah, just really looking forward to the season. We made it all the way here, September 2nd today. But yeah, on the cusp of another marathon that we'll have to sprint for the next, 17 weeks. So very excited, guys.
Good stuff. And Doc.
Yeah. Well, you can follow me on Twitter at TFSDoc, the Fantasy Sports Doc. Just want to say thanks for purchasing the league and for a lot of guys being really lively in the chat. That definitely makes it more fun for us. These are fun as it is, but having you guys and being able to interact and kind of get the thought process behind some of the moves and what you think about if you're picking up what we're putting down, and even if you're not, that's okay too. If you guys are into it, you want to learn more about injury analysis in fantasy football and how you can win this goddamn league and every other league that you're in, then you can check out my book, Injuries Suck, But Your Fantasy Team Doesn't Have to. It's available on Amazon. There's a print version, there's an e-version, and then there's an audio version available on Audible. So if that's something you're into, go check it out. And thanks again for doing this. Jeff, thanks for having me. Guys, it's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you, the three of you. And then only thing I wanted to plug is our free Discord, right? You got access to all three of these guys, plus me, plus all the guys over at Going for2. We have over 50 fantasy coaches in the Discord that are there to help you. Ask any question, just tag fantasy coach, and they can give you a hand. We got over 2,000.
Most of them are actually pretty smart, too.
Yeah, most of them are pretty smart.
Most of them.
Yeah, and the Doc has his own injury channel as well, so he'll be putting his injury stuff in there. So check out the Discord. It's linked in my Twitter bio. You can find it at goingfor2.com. It's all totally free. We even do DFS in there. We've got prop bets and in spreads and the whole nine. So come check us out in the Discord. For Brian, for Raul, for the Doc, I'm Jeff, and we will see y'all next year. And good luck.